want to thank you all for coming out for this clinic on this February 20th. Um, my apologies if you find any shortcomings in this. Um, I had just a week to throw it together because the originally scheduled clinician fell ill and was unable to um, take part. So uh, this is going to be about a model I've made, a diorama of Drake's early Pennsylvania oil well. And it all began um, when I built two original Densmore tank cars for my Master Builder Cars project.
Hmm.
And since today's original topic was supposed to involve tank cars, these are really early tank
Hmm.
cars. Um, I wrote about these a couple years ago in the flyer, so I'm not going to dwell on them here, but they were built board by board. Um, the tanks were made around a 3D formed conical shape, and then I applied the strip wood siding to them, tapering them to fit. And I put the bands around by taking masking tape and laying it out in a piece of glass, and spray painting it black, and then cutting very thin strips to put the bands around the tanks. Um, I ended up making two of these, both of which got merit awards in the process of the Master Builder Cars ratings. A short, which is the one everybody probably remembers, and then the long. In the course of making these, I consulted with two master model railroaders, including a guy named Harold Russell, who was master model railroader number 14. And he was the one that drew the original plans that I got for the long Densmore. And um, he was very kind to allow me to use that. At any rate, one of the nice touches, I found this clearly genuine Drake's Well oil bottle on eBay, and I had to have it so I could dip some and create spills with a little authenticity. And as Matt Thompson said, if I choose to believe that this is real Drake's oil, then more power to me. So
Oh, does that get you extra points on the car builder?
absolutely, just another detail. Huh? So at any rate, I had these two Drake's oil well, these two Densmore tank cars, and I needed a special place to put them, and they didn't really fit on my. I didn't want to put them on a shelf, and they weren't really suited for my HO scale logging and mining layout set in Nevada in the late 1800s. So I decided that I was going to make a small diorama and built it around a Drake's oil well. And uh, while it wouldn't be completely historically accurate, the Densmores could be parked there, and it would look credible. So I discovered there'd once been a Drake's Well kit made by Ye Old Huff and Puff, long out of production by a firm that's long out of business. But I was fortunate to be able to find one on eBay, and it was in the old style of kits, really a box of sticks. Um, there was no laser cut wood or resin or other cast components that could be easily assembled. This was
That's just because there were no lasers then.
That might be something to do with it. This was more like scratch building, really. You had various color coded pieces of strip wood, 3 pages of often incomprehensible, inadequate instructions, and a 3 page fold out template depicting the model in scale. And you were supposed to take your color coded piece of strip wood and lay it against the template and then cut it. Um, and so I began, and it was board by board uh, until we did all the cladding along the sides and put in the windows and and did some staining. And this model was a reasonable facsimile of the original well, but on searching online, I found several old archival photos and illustrations of the real one that showed some differences that I decided to incorporate. Now, in addition to the kit itself, the wood parts, there were little pouches with unpainted metal details like the steam boiler, the well pump, the flywheels, even a small oil tank, sawhorse, sledgehammer, shovel, chair, along with a whole bunch of little pieces whose purpose was not identified anywhere in the instructions, and which I ended up not using. They were nice touches, but to make a whole diorama, I was going to need a lot more. So you can see the inside in this picture. That material, at least the black part in the center there, the steam engine, the flywheels, and the band were all part of it, along with the wellhead hoist that was seen in an earlier photo. Once I built this, I tried to plan out what else I needed. And among the many things I decided I needed was a couple of outbuildings, like those that were seen in some of the archival photos. And so I decided to use 2 bunkhouses from a logging camp kit by Dr. Ben's Scale Model Emporium. Making one significant modification to this, I substituted strip wood roofing in place of the supplied simulated tar paper that came with the kit. Additionally, I cast several rocks using a Woodland Scenics mold and some hydrocal, and I pre-painted these with various stains. And then I assembled a lot of barrels, other tools, things like that I would need. And with that all in readiness, I selected a 2x2 foot piece of pink foam insulation, 1 inch thick, from Home Depot as my diorama base. It's something I've used before. I eventually cut it down to about 2 feet by 18 inches. And using some scraps from a Woodland Scenics white foam sheet plus some bits of thick cardboard, I laid out some small elevations in the terrain. And I cut out a channel in the back for a simulated oil creek, and left a flat section in the front that you can see there at the lower end for the track. And I decided to lay a main line right across the bottom and use a number 5 turnout that I scratch built for my AP civil certificate to run a siding to the well. Planning ahead, I decided I needed some pine trees like those that were present at the time and are still present today on the Drake's Museum grounds. And I'd been pretty disappointed with some of the tree models I'd seen. But in a recent issue of Narrow Gauge and Shortline Gazette, I saw an ad, a very small ad from an outfit called Mackenzie Brothers Timber Company. And after examining the photos of pines on their website, I placed an order. And I described my specific needs in an exchange with John Mackenzie, who was very helpful, and he made those trees, and they came pretty quickly, and I thought they were perfect. So the first thing I did was, as I've done before, I laid plaster sheets across this, the diorama base and the terrain that I had put in it. And here you can see clearly the channel in the top right of the diorama that I put in for the oil creek. I then painted this all over with a watery burnt umber acrylic and started adding a variety of ground cover. mainly fine turf earth from Woodland Scenics. And then I added some yellow grass and earth as well as field grass of various hues and placed some yellow peel and stick tufts around the area. I also took some brown dirt and sprinkled in the areas in front of the well and the two outbuildings and made a road leading up to the well and one leading to the loading dock. The big boulder is no longer sitting right there when we get finished, but you'll see that later. And there's the creek that's in that back corner. Oil Creek is a much larger body of water, but for the purposes of the diorama, I decided to compress it and fit it there. So it came then to hand laying the track. And after positioning the turnout, I laid out wooden ties for the spur and the main line and cut lengths of micro engineering code 83 rail to fit. And using track spacers, I first applied a bit of glue to the ties and set the track in place. And after double checking the spacing, I began spiking every fourth tie with micro engineering small spikes. Later, I set the turnout back in place with glue, weathered the rails with various substances, and used a combination of gravels as ballast. I didn't put down a roadbed like cork or some of the rubber product. I just kept it straight on the ground. I also, there you can see the handmade turnout before it's put in place and before the rest of the track is put down. And you see the big boulder is no longer there, blocking access to the loading dock. For the turnout, I had to order off eBay a precision scale brass harp switch stand, which would be prototypically time-wise accurate for this particular turnout. And while working on the track, I poured the creek. I decided to experiment this time using Woodland Scenics water waves in the creek bed, allowing it to flow to the ends of the diorama that I had sealed off to prevent spillage. And of course, the dams I had in place did not contain the flow of this substance. And after I allowed the water that remained in the creek to dry, I poured some more in after creating better dams. This stuff is more like a gel versus the resin compound that they use in their water, murky water. This is designed, you put it down and you can scoop it up and create waves with it if you want to, like rolling waves. I decided, since I just had this small area I wanted to fill, I'd see what I could do with it. And in the end, it worked out all right. So one thing I really needed to have was lots of barrels. And because originally the oil was shipped in barrels by wagons or by barge on Oil Creek if the water level was sufficient. And early information I had, sometime the oil was actually dumped into the Demsmore tank cars from barrels. But later I discovered that they could run a pipeline down to the well, to the track, and they created a special dual-headed dispenser, which you'll see shortly. But here you can see a wagon load of oil being taken off, and in the old days, actually when Drake's Well was built, the oil was transported by barrel in horse-drawn carts to the nearest railhead because the rail didn't come to Drake's Well at that time. Barrels, here you can see I brought some new barrels fresh from the manufacturer into the into Drake's Well for processing. And above it, you can see this special dual-headed feeder, which was designed specifically for the Densmores. Um, and here you can see the pipeline I installed running from the well to the loading dock. It was a piece of brass tubing I had. And the X-shaped supports are similar to those found actually that were in use in early Pennsylvania oil wells. And here you can see the dual-headed feeder first in the model, and then in the right, that's an archival photo of how they actually used it. At a place called Greg's Switch, which was near Titusville, which is near where Drake's Well was located. So where are we? Here you see a picture of the Densmore being loaded in the diorama. So I have to disclose something here. While all the elements that are in this diorama are prototypically accurate, the diorama isn't totally historically accurate. You could say it engages in selective compression of both time and space, because the Drake's Well ceased production in 1862. And that was before the construction of the first Demsmore tank cars in 1865. Drake and his workers loaded barrels of oil onto wagons to drive them to the nearest railhead, because the railroad wasn't extended to this area until 1865. The pipeline and the dual head feeding system was first used on the Oil Creek Railroad at a place called Greg's Switch, south of Titusville in 1866. Now, so there's my disclosure statement here. I'll give you a second to read it. So if you were to go to Titusville, to the Drake Well Museum and Park, you'd see that they have a restored version of Drake's Well. And until recently, they had a Densmore replica, but they had to take it away a couple years ago because it was falling apart. And at that time, they didn't have the money to renovate it. But I got word recently that they have restored it, and the museum hopes to have it back on display sometime later this year. The museum, which I have not been to, is north of Pittsburgh, about 300 miles or a 5-hour plus drive from where I live in Rockville, in Maryland. So, but I'd like to get up there this summer and check it out. So this is one of the archival photos that I really enjoyed. Colonel Drake in the top hat and standing by that big pile of junk lumber. And here's my little version of that scene. I just happen to have this knuckle duster miniature figure of a guy in a top hat, and I just thought he was perfect for the scene. The extra oil tank that I have there in front of the well I had a leftover 3D tank that I clad and put the strapping around, much like I did on the Densmore tank cars, and placed it there. And you can see the pile of debris down there in front in the lower right of the photograph, like the one in the archival photo. And then in putting it together, I put some other workmen in place, and log piles and crates and barrels and tools. And, it was a lot of fun to put it together. And here's a scene as the layout looks. So as I did with the Demsmore tank cars, I shared the photos of this diorama with the good folks at Drake's Museum. And while the curator there, Susan Beats, called it, gave me a great job and a well done, she also set me straight on the historical facts. So my thanks to her, uh, as well as to Harold Russell and Richard Sengies, the two MMRs who helped me with the Demsmore tank cars. So one of the reasons I've enjoyed doing this is that making a diorama or a micro layout is something that takes you much less time than building a 28-foot by 40-foot layout in your basement. And this is the second one I've made. The first one, you might recall, I made one of the for the of the depot area around Woodsboro, Maryland, around 1900, including an old mill and a hardware shop and some houses. And I built the cars of the time to go with it, a couple of old Pennsylvania Union Line freight cars and an old Pennsylvania Railroad mail car, RPO. And I did that for my AP prototype model certificate. So, in addition to making these things doable in a smaller, less amount of time than a big layout, you can use things you've made for AP certificates. And eventually, I could see somehow linking this into a larger layout if I had the opportunity to do that. That might be fun. And of course, it is all about fun. So, as I said, my thanks to the curator of Drake Museum and to Dick Sengies and Harold Russell for their help. And here's the aerial view of the layout. That's a Bachmann 440 over there on the right side of the photo that I have pulling a BTS low-sided gondola with a little water tank car in the background. And that's it. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.